So in honor of Martin Luther King weekend, my talk today is on freedom. And I've asked Reverend Sandy Spurgeon to join me in delivering the talk. I was reminded as I was just sitting up here a few minutes ago that I had actually come across a song and set it aside for today, and of course then totally forgot about it. But it was based on an incident where someone came up to Martin Luther King and filled his mouth with phlegm and then spat right in his face. Now you can imagine what would be your response if someone did that. So he took out his handkerchief, wiped his face, and he said, "I believe this is yours." I think that speaks to the power of presence and awareness and consciousness to be able to do that in a moment of hate like that. I was reminded of that from the video that you've probably seen on TV yesterday of the Native Indian man just drumming away in the face of just out and out hatred. So we are all becoming these free beings who are going to have that power, who have that power. We will manifest that. And I start with, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land where the pilgrims cried. From every mountainside let freedom ring. Let freedom ring, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, free at last." These are the closing words of Martin Luther King's dream speech from June 1963.
We know over 50 years after his speech that while some progress has been made, much is still left to be done. The injustices of the land, indeed of the world, continue unabated and even seem to be gaining ground. So why haven't we done better? Why haven't we used our spiritual power to embody freedom for all? We listen now to the text of his speech with the current unity commentary and perspective added.
So I'm going to read 99% of the speech, and then Sandy will read a little commentary as we go. "I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation."
Yes, indeed. What is needed today is a demonstration of freedom by us that demonstrates how not to be enslaved by the conditioned, unlimited thinking of this world and return the human mind left to its own devices.
50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity.
2,000 years ago, a spiritual light named Yeshua ben Joseph embodied and declared for all humanity an absolute freedom from the power of death and unleashed the absolute power of love to overcome all adversities and adversaries.
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself an exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition.
Today we gather here still languishing in mental and emotional poverty, in the midst of a vast ocean of spiritual prosperity. We have gathered to steep ourselves once again in a freeing tradition and teaching, so as to walk in the footsteps of one who truly was free and who unleashed the power of heaven on earth.
In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
We have come here to cash a check written with spiritual power. When Charles and Myrtle Fillmore wrote their contract with God and letter of intent, copies of which are on the secretary's desk out in the hallway, they were signing a promissory note to which all unity adherents fall heir. Their note was that all their followers would embody and experience the power of the living God within them.
It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we have come here to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
We have not fully cashed our inheritance check as unity followers. Do we consciously embody healing energy? Are we in the world but not of it, not enslaved by its fake stories and offers of false dawns? Have we come here to embrace the power of the present moment and the power to change the future? Now is the time to put an end to the great lie of human separation from God and from each other. So this morning, we cash our check fully and receive the full inheritance promised us as loved children of God, whose spiritual bank overflows with prosperity, health, peace, and freedom.
It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not the end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges.
2019 is a new beginning point for us. We leave the past behind and do not judge according to what has been, but what is promised. There will not be peace in the world until we all embrace our full spiritual identity, and society will not benefit and be free.
But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people, for many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with ours. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone.
All people of spiritual goodwill have come to realize that our destiny is interwoven and interdependent. All have come to realize that our freedom is inextricably bound one to another. We cannot walk alone or think that our path is superior to others, to which they must be converted.
And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing to vote for. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
We cannot be satisfied as long as one person believes that they are merely human and that the divine power is not available to them. As long as anyone believes that, sickness, disease, injustice, and poverty are more powerful than the indwelling presence of the divine. We must never give in to the merely human perspective of things.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from the narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back home knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair.
Leave here today and go to your homes, communities, and places of work, knowing that whatever your circumstance and relationships with people, they can be changed if you will be the change agent. There is never a reason to wallow in despair.
I say today to you, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, little black boys and girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
We too have a dream that the vision of Jesus Christ, of Buddha, and Krishna, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, a vision of humanity living in unity, and peace will be a reality for us and for all people.
This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with a new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, all of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
With this faith, we are working together. We are praying together, achieving together, standing up in freedom together, knowing that we are free today, if we so choose.
So let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black and white, Jew and Gentile, Protestant and Catholic, Hindu and Muslim, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. I thank God Almighty, we are free at last.